Good afternoon. This is Caleb Brown with the Libertarian Book Club. Today I'm on with someone I met on Twitter who wants to remain anonymous, so I'm just going to refer to him as Madra. Madra, how you doing?
Good, and yourself? Hello, everybody. My name is Madra. The Twitter handle is madra.io, and I am a bit of a civilization architect, subconscious programmer, and a member of being an autonomous human being.
Sounds good. I want to ask you about that, actually, if you don't mind.
Of course.
That sounds very techno-anarchism. Is that what it is, or is that something different?
Essentially, it would be something along that of like techno anarchism. It's a shift of a paradigm, right? Because right now, if one has the vision to see, you can see that America is kind of in the middle of its collapse, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm a strong proponent of doing something or being proactive in something than being reactive, right? So proactively building a civilization before the one we are living in completely collapses, and then that's where everybody looks at each other and goes, what do we do now? Mm-hmm. So I am really big on if not me, then who, right? You can't just always rely on other people to do things for you. You have to essentially take it upon yourself to be the change you want to see in the world, correct?
Yeah. What's that? Oh crap! I forgot the Tolstoy quote about it. But it basically was when Michael Jackson, I'm starting with the man in the mirror kind of thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
I quote that Tolstoy quote all the time, and in the moment I actually have a chance to say it, blank.
Yeah, that's how it works sometimes, you know.
Yeah. Okay then. So today we're going to talk Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine, I think everyone knows who Thomas Paine is. He was a big-time revolutionary. He was a radical by that time's considerations. He wrote Common Sense, which was a big influencer pamphlet that was given out around I think it was 1776, if not the 1775. It was being handed out to the colonists of America to energize them to the Revolutionary War.
Yes.
Madra, how did you first hear about Common Sense by Thomas Paine?
Let me see if I can jog my own memory. At first, I was actually reading The Age of Reason when I was not necessarily introduced to Thomas Paine, but reintroduced. Long ago, back, you see me post a little bit of stuff about the Liberty Kids, right? And I remember seeing that. Yeah. I remember seeing that show growing up, but for whatever reason, it was almost completely wiped away from my memory. So that's when I would say I was introduced to Thomas Paine, but didn't have the actual understanding of who Thomas Paine was and what he represented then and now. So my introduction into Thomas Paine was through The Age of Reason, which was my own spirituality search, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, he had a lot of great writings. After I got to Common Sense, I started doing what was it? He wrote it in response to a book about the French Revolution. I have it saved in my phone right here. He wrote in response book about the French Revolution, Reflections of Man or something, and he responded basically writing his own. The Rights of Man by Thomas Paine.
Yeah, The Rights of Man.
Great, it's going great. I gotta say, I wrote him off like an idiot. But he's just a guy who wrote Common Sense, and he was done. I wrote him off like a moron. Dude is an incredible writer. Really, you read Common Sense, and you're energized to fight the British all over again.
Yeah.
This dude's incredible. That's how I heard about him as well. It was through Liberty Kids. Not gonna lie, but the moment I finished reading Common Sense, I rewatched the Liberty Kids episode, which led to me rewatching the entire show because it still holds up to this day.
Oh, absolutely. It's really really difficult to see American animation doing good things like it was then, and then you look at American animation now, and it's kind of a bunch of rubbish, a lot of
Yeah.
propaganda mixed in there.
Oh, absolutely. The fact that one of the episodes they had there was a, I can't remember his name, but he was the black guy on the show. He was a former slave, now freed by by Benjamin Franklin, and he had to travel to go pick up a new printer, and they had to carry a letter proving his freedom, and he went into a slave auction, and like they're covering slavery and escapes, and his brother went and fought for the Brits for his freedom. It was like I'm like, this is a kids show. I watched this in like first grade, and they're talking slavery and being not propaganda about it, just staying as fact. It was very. I watched it now with this breath. I was jawed by how radical the cartoon was. I guess it was. If more kids watched that today, I think we'd be better off in the future.
Mm-hmm. And the African American guy you were talking about, I think his name was Crispus Attucks, right? Which was I think he was killed during the Boston Massacre. Correct me if I'm wrong. Don't quote me on that. But I do remember when I was a child, I played Crispus Attucks in like my kindergarten play.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I can't imagine any school touching that topic without being like scarred for life. I mean, from both sides. I mean, if they even touch that topic nowadays, I feel like it's gonna go downhill for them.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta say, I was reading Common Sense, and it's so much of it when he talks about the failures of government. He sounds like almost like Lysander Spooner in a sense, where he seems very radical against government, but then he keeps attacking monarchy and not states in general. Kind of disappointing, honestly. I was really reading him thinking this guy sounds like an anarchist, and he's not, but he's still incredible and a great writer, incredibly proficient. I wonder why he was not a anarchist. I mean, there were anarchists. Was it? I think there were like a few anarchists at the time. He wrote Common Sense. But he seemed to believe like James Madison, men are not angels, so we need a state kind of thing. I mean, I read that early on in the Common Sense. I was like wrote it down to quote it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you have to kind of look at the time then, right? I mean, America was still essentially part of Great Britain at the time, so there was no such thing as a state yet, So if you were to put yourself into his mind, we're just gonna, imagine this. He couldn't even fathom a state, in which we know it or what they would later eventually develop into. So he only is going off of what he knows is right and what he knows is wrong. So he just knows being a part of Britain is bad, but can we get something of common ground that's not so tyrannical of Britain? Or we can, like a middle ground between anarchism and stateship.
I guess at the same time I was reading Common Sense, I was also reading some of Hans Hermann Hoppe's work and going through that and hearing Thomas Paine rail against monarchies and kings and hearing Hoppe talk about monarchy and king. It was very jarring to hear both these radical freedom fighters, I guess you would say, both have very different views on. It made me really question Hans Hermann Hoppe's view on monarchy. Maybe it's just he's looking back at the past with rose-colored glasses compared to the guy who was living in the times, I have a quote here from I forgot to open with this, but Thomas Paine, when he wrote Common Sense, one of the quotes was, "I offer nothing more than simple facts, plain arguments, and common sense." I wish that was a more prevalent opening to things. Like this sounds very. Here it is. I laid it out for you. Take it with what you will, but here's the facts. It's a very beneficial. So Thomas clearly it had some effect. We're talking about it now. We're not speaking with British accents. It had lots of effects on the population of the colonies. I think it led to someone being tarred and feathered. Actually, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that one either, because I forgot to write that down today. But I'm pretty sure people read that and tarred and feathered some governor or some sheriff type person in the area that day. Did he sign the Constitution? I'm gonna have to look it up real quick. Actually, I can't remember if he was a signer.
I can look it up. I already have I have some open tabs.
You signed the Constitution. I still look this up
Pretty
beforehand.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
all
he
good.
did not. He did not sign it. Nor did he sign the Declaration of Independence. Oh, that's weird.
Well,
So much respect for sign things.
Yeah, because if you think about him, if you kind of would imagine you understand a little bit of Thomas Paine, it would be kind of contrary for him to sign such thing and be a part of something, right? Because it's not necessarily Britain and it's not necessarily the America that we know today. So like it's kind of if you don't die a hero, you live yourself long enough to become the villain type thing.
Yeah.
So just morally, he would be like, I would assume, he would be like, you know what, I don't even want to be my name on this because it would essentially invalidate the majority of his works, right?
No, I can see that. I can absolutely see that. That makes sense, actually. I agree with that. Well, I want to talk about Thomas Paine. I wanted to ask you said you read earlier, you read his, what was one you went to he said he read about your spiritual transition or whatever it was called? He called it, what was it?
The Age of Reason?
Age of Reason, yeah.
Yeah.
If you would like, I would actually, I've skimmed it to a summary of what it was, but I've never heard anyone actually talk about it. If you would like, I would like to hear you explain a little bit more about what that book was about.
Okay, so this I don't know where your space is when it comes to. I just want to preface it because Age of Reason is a very challenging book for people who have like a faith in religion, right? Whether it be Christianity or Catholicism or any of that. Much like Common Sense, Thomas Paine was being very objective from his, I guess, subjective point of view in regarding the Bible, right? And he just looks at the Bible. He pulls out the Bible in the Age of Reason. You can follow along, right? And he goes from the book of Genesis to the book of Revelation about all of the inconsistencies and how you can see that the Bible is not necessarily taken for something that, how can I articulate this? It's the views on how people were looking at the Bible he thought was kind of wrong, because how can you align yourself with something that has perpetuated murder, genocide, rape, all of these things, and yet say you are this type of person or that type of person, right? He's not saying that God does not exist, because you can obviously look out into the world and you can see everything that God has created. What he's saying is that the Bible could have been written or has been written by people trying to alter people's perspectives and minds to keep them, subverted to the state, which essentially that's where like the dogma of religion comes from. People are willing to subvert themselves from God instead of looking at themselves as God's creation with God inside of them. So it's
go ahead, continue.
So it's a more of criticizing the Bible. It's not denouncing it completely, right? Because he's being completely objective and fair. Because they talk about something about in the book of Genesis, one of the giants. They're talking about the bed was this wide and it was this long. And Thomas Paine, I don't know the exact quote, but he says, okay, well, they're being very specific about how big this bed was. So therefore, I can give a little merit to what they're saying. But then he was able to contrast and say, okay, well, if we're looking at the word prophet, right? Who's the prophet? Prophets are poets, right? Because of the word prophet or poet got turned into prophets, or to prophecy, which means to sing a song or to be a poet of certain words for people to hear. And it's just all of the lost in translation stuff that people are willing to take it for face value and not even question it, because I guess I mean, I would agree with him that it would be kind of blind not to question your faith a little bit. You know, you gotta give me something tangible. You know, even though knowing is knowing, like we know God exists. Right?
And he was
sorry.
Thomas. No problem. Thomas Paine was a deist. I believe most founding fathers at the time were deistic. They believed you look into the world and see God as a real, tangible being who created things, but not one that had a current role in society, or that all religions were man-made based on the obvious fact of God's creation. I argue deism. I've always said this before, that theism takes faith, but so does atheism. You have to have faith in something or faith in nothing. Reason alone points to there being deism, you know. So the most reasonable position in absence of faith is deistic. And that's what Thomas Paine sounds like. He sounds like someone who was very reasonable and was trying to provide. What I've read of his reason, inconsistencies in the Bible are very prevalent saying. As someone who is Catholic, and I've had to deal with that a lot, he has very good, legitimate criticisms, I would say. I have similar criticisms with people who are, I would say, fundamentalists who read it only in a literal manner. You know, they read it word for word literal and never have any interpretation of anything. The young West types, if you will. And so I feel that people write Thomas Paine off as some anti-religious radical. When I feel like I've done similar things, arguing with these fundamentalists, and I'm still religious. So I probably need to sit down and actually read it. I'm working my way through his books now. I guess that one will be next on my list to read. He is a fascinating character, Thomas Paine. So much. He's the fact again. It's weird that a lot of these founding fathers, I feel like, are looked at differently. You know, like a lot of the founding fathers. I mean, Thomas Jefferson was a great, and it has been Hamilton both. And Thomas Paine, these people are political philosophers and theorists and actual politicians, but they wanted to say they were radical revolutionaries. They were soldiers. I mean, they wore many hats, and we look at them through a weird lens of like, they were just great people. It's like they were ridiculously smart and created the longest lasting constitution, I think, on earth. Whatever you say about the Constitution, you have your problem with it. I think it basically became worthless after the Civil War, but at least before the Civil War, it was a pretty useful document.
Yeah.
Okay, well, one other thing to talk about was Thomas Paine. Do you have anything you want to say more about Thomas Paine or common sense?
Regarding like Thomas Paine and common sense both, is that the tones of Age of Reason and common sense are both the same thing. You know, it's purely based upon objectivity. Same as with the Age of Reason. Age of Reason, he essentially called out the church, right? He was like, I want you, and this is actually within the book as well, he calls them out. He says, prove me wrong. Here I am putting these things, objective facts, so that you cannot delineate from them, you cannot ignore them. What do you have to say to these things? And it's essentially the matter of fact sense that he does with common sense, because looking back and contrasting to where we are now, there is no common sense. Common sense is no longer common, you know.
Yeah.
And the frankness of both of these reads and Thomas Paine as a person is just interesting to see that how far America has fallen since then.
Now, that is a great point. Anyone listening to this, as someone who is a big believer in radical messaging and not toning down your message just to simply gain followers, a follower who follows you for your milquetoast speech is not someone who's going to stand with you when the ATF hits your door. Being radical has its benefits, and Thomas Paine is a great example of being radical in the pursuit of freedom and pursuit of truth. And he is just an all-around great founding father. And if you're sleeping on him or ignoring his work like I was, you're missing out. Because even if you don't agree with him, you respect the audacity in his writings. We got a few more minutes left. I want to ask you a few more questions about that. I keep forgetting what it's called. Civilization building.
Okay.
We talked about, what does he call it again? I should have wrote it down.
Well, my title is civilization architect, right? So my job title is to develop the infrastructure to create a civilization, right? So over the past several months, all I do is I'm studying, I'm learning, I'm reading, I'm watching, because there's no framework for this. There's no blueprint for creating a civilization after Rome falls again, right? Because after the fall of Rome, we lost everything. Everything was destroyed. All of the heads and the statues were just cut off, and the texts were burned, and humanity kind of got sent back to the Stone Age, right? So the job title that I've developed for myself, because I don't think there is civilization architect that you can put on your resume and send it to a company. So I figured I'd make my own job title and make my own company, and then that company is called Freedom Command, right? I spent about 10 years in the Army, did some time in the chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosives corps, and then after getting out of that, I went into psychological operations command for about 4 years, and I got out. And Freedom Command comes from the acronyms that the military use, right? So one of those would be Pacific Command, also known as FREECOM, which would be the entire region of the Pacific Ocean, right? Then you have AFRICOM, which would be Africa Command, which would be the entire command of the Africa continent. So Freedom Command is the command for freedom, autonomy, and holism. So my current plans or current project that I'm working on is that in Reno, Nevada, the mayor has allowed tech startup companies to begin setting up their own governments, right? Because I think Nevada sees something coming, which I continue to stress the point that America is in collapse right now. A lot of people are just waiting for there to be fires in the air, which they may not even see because of the landmass of America is so large. You may see it in a couple cities or whatnot, but America is so large. But getting back to Nevada, they're allowing tech startups to build their own governments, right? And some of the criteria would be like you already have roughly 50,000 acres or 100,000 acres and $1 million in funding or something like that to be recognized by Nevada state legislature to do this and to build these things. So my first project would be to be building a prototype city out here in Reno, Nevada that will be fully functional, fully autonomous, just create a prototype.
A Jones goat, as you will.
Yeah, just the first step into a larger thing.
That's interesting. That is very interesting. I'd be curious to see how that pans out for you. I'll keep following your Twitter and stay up to date because that sounds interesting. I gotta say, man, I absolutely. Go ahead.
I'm definitely not the first person doing this. This is a whole space of creatives like myself who have a vision. You know, just the space is there. I'm working with and a member of Praxis Society, or Praxis Threshold, and it's just a group of creators building cities across the globe. Charter Cities is the real estate developer for Praxis. So the space is here.
Very interesting. Now, I gotta say, I absolutely love you on Twitter. I think you're great. I saw you underneath a few of Michael Malice's Twitter posts yesterday, and you were just doing fantastic. People were trying to say things like, what was it? Someone said, if anarchism works, then why don't you just go off and like it's a socialist, just go build your own society. You know,
Yeah.
we've gone from being told to go build your own Facebook to build your own country.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, like I don't see that as a threat.
Like, let me, if you let me and my friends pull out and stop paying taxes on property that we own legitimately, then so be it. Let me pull out of this country. This nonsense. You know, they won't let you, and that is the problem. It's like if I think it was Eric July from Eric July, he said, take success all the way down to the individual. You know, that is the eventual goal, but for that to first happen, you have to let groups succeed. So let me succeed. Let your techno company succeed.
Exactly.
Not just succeed in the win sense, but in to succeed and like pull out. I want to be done with this. Like all these people I deal with on Twitter, I don't want to deal with you anymore. Your vote matters as much as my vote. That's just fucking stupid.
Exactly. Yeah, like people. I don't tend to argue with people on Twitter anymore because like I come from like I know like I spend almost 20 hours a day learning. You know, like I sleep with headphones in my ear. I'm subconsciously learning. I'm consciously learning. So when I speak on Twitter, it's not from a belief. It's from a place of knowing. You know. So when someone says go build your own thing, and I say okay, and then then the ATF may do something. You go, well, what is the ATF? A group of thugs that are trained and armed. That's not an issue, especially coming from the Army. You know, like that's not an issue for me. The only time that becomes an issue is for people who are scared of those type of things. You know, because I mean, you and I both know it's liberty or death. There's no in between.
Give me freedom or give me death. Patrick Henry, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Have you ever watched this? There was a movie made in the 1940s, or maybe the 60s. I can't remember when it was made. About just that speech. It was literally it was like a 20-minute short film, all about him giving that speech. Give me liberty, give me death. The entire thing's on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description. But if you haven't checked it out, you gotta watch it. It is just the actors are incredible, and the way he delivers the lines, you get inspired to grab your musket.
I'm gonna have to take a listen to that. I'm not very versed into old America and like what everything they did. Like I said, I didn't stumble upon Thomas Paine, but I kind of stumbled upon Thomas Paine in like my understanding pursuit of spirituality, and which led me to common sense. But I just don't have the scope of always looking back. We know what is a fact and what is good from the past, so now let's apply it to the present future, you know?
Agreed.
Because everybody is, sorry.
No, it's not. Go ahead.
Everybody is just, for me, everybody's talking about the past, you know, and, well, it's this and that, but it's like, okay, what are we doing now? The past has already happened. Like, can we start collaborating and working together to get the ball rolling, you know, like but people don't understand that they don't understand the time is of the essence.
Agreed. Well, we're running out of time. I have 2 more questions for you, and I got to wrap it up. Question 1.
All right.
If you could recommend any 3 books, what would you recommend?
Okay. And within what genre? Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied there.
You know what? Let's say political, and then the other 2, whatever book you want to name.
Political book. I actually have my reading list. That I'll go down. I would say political book. I would say Common Sense, and it's not even really a book. It's a short read. It's 2 hours, and it's a call to action essentially. Why try and if it worked in the past, it should work now. And if you would say if someone were to read this, and they had common sense, they'd get the point. They didn't have common sense, then you missed the message, you missed the mark.
That is a great point. I've said that before. When arguing with people, like if you're logical, they're going to at least see where you're coming from, and it's worth having a discussion. But if they can't even see where you're coming from, they are so illogical, you're never going to change their mind, nor would you want them on your side anyway. So don't waste your time.
Exactly. Now, my other title, another business that I'm building is subconscious programming, right? Because a lot of human beings don't understand that whatever we watch, whatever you read, whatever you do, it's being programmed into the subconscious mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who live in fear generally only watch fear-based programming, right? Whether it be, say, Law and Order, right? Law and Order's got a lot of murder on there, and that kind of perpetuates fear.
Mm-hmm.
So where I'm going with this is that instead of programming your subconscious mind with negative or disempowering beliefs, let's completely cut that off and start programming the subconscious mind consciously and subconsciously with empowering beliefs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you sit there, if you're unhappy, and if you sit there and tell yourself you're happy for 21 days throughout the entire day, I promise you, at the end of those 21 days, you're going to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're subconsciously training, you're not even thinking about being happy anymore. You're just being happy. So with that being said, I would recommend the first book would be, let me find it. It is The Possibility Principle by, hopefully this doesn't play, The Possibility Principle, How Quantum Physics Can Improve the Way You Think, Live, and Love by Mel Schwartz. That's MELSCHWARTZ. That book within itself, it's about a 6.5 hour read. I love audiobooks. Like I said, I subconsciously program. I live and breathe this stuff. And this also ties into our liberty conversation. If you want to change who you are as a person, you have to change your environment and change the way you think about yourself and the environment, and 100% I guarantee change. And then the third book that I would recommend, do the wild card, would be my favorite book that had, was the catalyst of my awakening, which would be Friedrich Nietzsche, Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Let's see.
That's
a good one.
I love that book personally, and it's something that ties into freedom and liberty. You know, it's people tend to, or human beings tend to look for something or someone to save them versus saving themselves first. And once you save yourself, you can go help other humans to save themselves.
Brother Tree, good book recommendations. Thank you for recommendations. Last question, where can people find you? Let's bring up your Twitter, bring up anything you want to bring up. One more time for the people listening.
Sweet. You can find me on Twitter at Madara_IO. That's MADARA_IO on Twitter. And for the other link would be Urbit. Urbit is it's a decentralized web experience, and my planet name on Urbit is Ragnell Marwin. That's RAGNEL /or Marwin MARWEN.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thanks for coming on, man. It was a lot of fun. As always, people listening, thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe. And I think that's it. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
All right, now.
Thank you so much. I have one more thing.
Oh, go ahead.
My website. Sorry, definitely forgot the website. FREECOM.us.
FREECOM.us. Okay. Well, as I was saying, good night, everybody. Thanks for listening. Bye now.